All right. Thank you, Gregory and Victoria, for joining us. Today is the second part of our Fulbright English Teaching Award series. The first part last week, we talked about the basics of the Fulbright and what it is, the English Teaching Award, what is the application components. And so today we have Ms. Paige Jennings. She is a Fulbright advisor at the University of South Carolina. And so what she's going to do is just go a little bit more deeper into the application process. So we will do an overview again, but we're going to go more into the application process and just really nail down on how to be a strong and competitive applicant, especially in the essays component, because that is the root and the essence of the application. And that's where they really look to learn about who you are and how this is a good connection for the program. So without further ado, take it away, Paige. Feel free to bring up your PowerPoint. I've made you a co-host, so feel free to do your thing.
Alrighty, thank you. So before I get started, thank you for inviting me. I will say I'm not the most Zoom savvy because my university doesn't use Zoom. So if I make some mistakes, bear with me. I'm hoping that this can be kind of informal because I want to be able to help you really think through different things that are important to consider while applying for a Fulbright. So let's see, are you guys able to see that just fine? Alrighty, so there might be some overlap from what Ashley did last week, but I'm going to breeze right through it. So getting started, I'm going to wait for a second for this next person to join us just so she can hear us. Thank you for coming. My name is Paige Jennings. Like Stephanie said, I am working at the University of South Carolina in Columbia, and I'm the National Fellowships Coordinator there. So what I do is I help students identify and apply for a variety of nationally competitive awards, including Fulbright. So I'm the lead Fulbright Program Advisor at the University of South Carolina, so it's my baby, I love it. I was a 2016-2017 ETA, which is an English Teaching Assistant in South Korea. I lived in a small city called Mokpo, which is here on the map. It's the southern western part of the country. I loved it. It was the greatest experience ever. And so I'm really excited to share that experience with you. So for today's agenda, we're just going to do introductions. I would like to hear about you all and your interests. I really want to know about what you want to know so that I can kind of guide the conversation that way. So if you guys can introduce yourselves to me first, that would be awesome. Then I'm going to give a brief overview for people who are not at the last workshop. And then I'm going to go into who is a Fulbright ETA, choosing your location and application tips. I think the who and the where are very important when you're getting into your application because if you don't know where you want to go and you don't know what things about yourself you want to highlight, then you're not going to be able to put together the application components like you need to. So those are the first things we want to kind of tick off, and then we can go from there. And throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm sure Stephanie can let me know what comes in through the chat. And you can just unmute yourself and ask a question if you have one at any point. I will not mind being interrupted. And then, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So if you guys can each introduce yourselves, tell me what you're studying, where you're at in the Fulbright process, whether mentally or actually like pen to paper where you are. If you've studied abroad before, if you've applied for another national fellowship before, that would be really great. So I guess we'll start with Victoria.
Hello, everyone. I'm Victoria Parker. I am a graduate of the Prairie View A&M University. I am currently a master's PhD student at Purdue University. I became aware about Fulbright ETA last week when Stephanie hosted part one. Unfortunately, my school, they closed the deadline last month, so I can't apply for the upcoming application. So I have to wait until next year, but they are having an informational session next week, so I'll be attending that. I'm getting my master's in agricultural science, education, and communication. I'm interested in international education though. This stems from a study abroad I did with PV to Costa Rica. So I really enjoyed it. So I would like to shift my focus from ag to international education.
Awesome. Next, Gregory.
Well, greetings. I'm Gregory Bowens. I'm a senior at Prairie View A&M University. I am majoring in criminal justice and social work. My route is a little different because I do want to get my master's in education. So I would say where I'm at in the process is just learning right now, trying to take in everything as well as distributing it to other individuals within SGA, since I am the vice president, that are education majors and looking to go into international education.
Nice, thank you. And then Felicia.
Hi, I'm Felicia Mortaliver. I'm a PhD student at Prairie View A&M University. I taught grade school in Abu Dhabi for about 3 years, and I am currently teaching high school in Houston. I work with kids with autism and other low incidence disabilities. I worked with an NGO in Ghana for about 3 months, about a decade ago. My PhD my dissertation focuses on the global knowledge economy. And my undergrad was poli-sci, my master's was sociology, and my PhD is in educational leadership. I'm definitely looking to segue into probably a full-time position on the continent. Just haven't figured out how yet.
Awesome, thank you. And then Raven.
Yes, I'm sorry I was late.
No worries.
Am I just introducing myself?
Yep, just let us know what you're studying and where you are with the Fulbright process. If you're thinking of applying this year, have you studied abroad, where, that kind of thing.
Okay. My name is Raven Watkins. I am a management and marketing major with a minor in Spanish. And I have not yet started my application fully. However, I've just looked into it and done some research, and I would love to do the teaching assistant in Madrid. I served as a city year volunteer working with middle schoolers, and that's where I kind of fell in love with the idea of just kind of serving as a teaching aide and helping out and assisting with students.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you all for coming. I'll try to keep these things in mind. I've taken little notes about each of you so I can try to focus on things that you're interested in. Like I said, I'm just going to briefly go through these slides. I might skip some because it seems like you understand what the Fulbright's about, but pretty much it is a bilateral exchange between the US and different countries abroad. It is to promote mutual understanding, kind of peace and collaboration across the world. And so it's a US government funded award. That's something to keep in mind, because when you're writing these applications, you're going to have to think about what the US government has this program for and write it for that, right? So just like a job application has a call out for certain kind of people, they have a need that they're trying to fill, you need to keep that need in mind when you're working on your application. So Fulbright is looking to diversify their applicants, the places where they're going, the type of backgrounds that students are coming from, applicants are coming from, so geographic location, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, etc. This is important to keep in mind as well as you're working on your application, because they're telling you this is important. So if you embody some of these things, you need to get that down in your application, right? These are things that they're not going to be able to just assume about you. You have to write it explicitly. So I can't just assume that a student is a first-gen college student unless they say that in their application. So if you think it's something important about you that you want to share with the committee, make sure you get it down on paper. It is an art to write these kinds of applications, so there's a way to do it tactfully. There's an art to it, but that's something to keep in mind. Welcome, Danny. So for eligibility, I heard there are a couple people who are working on their PhDs right now. You can apply, you just cannot receive your doctorate at the time when you're applying. So if you are planning to apply in the future of this year, you decide this is not for you, you're gonna wait for the future, make sure that you do it before you obtain your doctorate. Because if so, then you need to apply for the scholar program instead of the US student program. So that's something to keep in mind. I'll also say that different universities have different timelines. So if some of you have previously been at Prairie View and you've gone to another institution, they might have different deadlines. So that's something to keep in mind as well. You do not have to be matriculated to apply. I actually applied after I'd already graduated from undergrad and worked about a year or two because I wanted to make sure that international ed was the path for me before I decided to go and spend a year teaching English. And so that's something to keep in mind as well. Even after you graduate, you are able to apply, and you can apply through Prairie View. So different award types, I think you guys are aware of these. I'm going to focus on the English Teaching Assistantship Award today because that's what Stephanie requested. I think that makes the most sense as well because that's kind of the lower hanging fruit, especially if you're planning to apply this cycle. The study and research grants do require a lot more heavy lifting in terms of the application process and the thought that needs to go into it before you even start writing. So I think starting with the English teaching assistantships is probably the best way to go. These grants last from 8 to 10 months. Some have an option to renew. So for example, in South Korea, where I was an ETA, we had the opportunity to renew for up to 3 years. I only opted to stay 1 year, but that is something to keep in mind. Is there a question in the chat?
Oh no, that was sorry about that. I was sending a message to Alicia since you mentioned being interested in going abroad for international research. I wanted to share about the Fulbright Research Study Award.
Yeah, so typically for people who are in their PhD, it's more common for them to do the study/research grant. Not to say that they can't do the English teaching assistantship, but it is more common for people with more advanced degrees to do the study or research grant versus the English teaching assistantship.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. But feel free to come up if you have someone else. But I just wanted to say that with her.
Thank you. All right, so award benefits. So for the most part, Fulbright covers the whole shebang. And that does differ from country to country and grant type to grant type. Because like I said, they're bilateral agreements between the US and that country. So that country is kind of driving what is offered. So let's say, for example, you want to go to the UK. Of course, they're not going to have an English teaching assistantship because they speak English. They have no need for it. And so they're not going to use their taxpayers' dollars to get a bunch of ETAs because they don't need them. Versus somewhere like Taiwan, where they do have a very large need for English teachers, they're going to have a very robust English teaching assistantship program. So that's something to keep in mind. This is something I'll also talk about when you're trying to choose your location because different locations offer different things. Make sure you look very closely at what they're offering. So for example, some countries will have study research molded together. The study grants means you can get a master's, potentially a PhD abroad, or do, non-credit bearing courses while you're abroad. So that's the study grant. And then the research grant is just doing an independent research project. So if you're getting your PhD and you want to spend a year doing research or, working with a certain NGO doing research abroad, that's going to go towards your dissertation. That's something that you can do. So some countries will have those grouped together. So they'll say, we're only giving 5, study and research combined. That's it. Other countries will have the study separated from the research grant. So they'll have master's, PhD, whatever, like just flat out like that. So that's something to keep in mind. So take a look at the country's page, know what they're asking for. They're doing a call out, know what they're asking for, know what they're offering, just like you will with a job. So post-grant, you get the opportunity to network with other Fulbrighters. A Fulbright network is strong. When I meet other people and I tell them that I'm a Fulbright, they're like, oh my gosh, like you're amazing, or oh my gosh, where did you do your Fulbright? I did mine here. there's a lot of benefits, like you just meet up with people like abroad. It's a really strong network, and you know you're in a pool of people that really have the same values as you, have the same experiences as you. I don't know if any of you guys, when you studied abroad, you came back and you're like, nobody gets it. Nobody really gets it, and I can't stop talking about it, and I'm really annoying right now. I know it. I can't stop. That's exactly how it is with Fulbright. Like, we are always talking about when I was a Fulbrighter and blah, blah, blah. And everyone else is just so annoyed, but we love talking to each other. And the thing is, Fulbright, they're looking for leaders. So these people end up being leaders in their field. So when you're applying for something and there might be a Fulbrighter reading your application, you're like, oh, they got a Fulbright. Well, they already know what that means. That means you've already been vetted. So that's something to keep in mind. There's conferences, there are networking events, lots of different opportunities with having that Fulbright name attached to you for the rest of your life. The next thing is non-competitive eligibility. So if you guys are interested in working for the government, that is an option. So they kind of get you to the front of the line right after like veterans get a certain benefit, you're going to be next in line for getting those jobs. So the path of Fulbright timeline, like I said, differs from school to school. And if you guys end up applying after you graduate, you could potentially apply at large, which means you don't have to be held to any school's timeline. So some schools have super early deadlines. My school's deadline is like mid-August. We still let students apply even after that date. They just don't go through our typical process. But the national deadline, your actual final date to get things in is October 13th. So if anyone in this group is planning to apply this cycle, you've got less than a month, and it is not the easiest application to put together. You really have to sit down and dedicate the time to it and make sure that you're doing this for the right reasons, that it makes the most sense for you. So after you hit submit on October 13th, in November, December, they have the national screening committees who meet and discuss all the different applications. So that is domestic in the US, they're making those decisions. At that point, they cut the applications in about half, and then they send your application to your host country, and you're only going up against your other host country people. That's really important to keep in mind when you're approaching the application, because you have to write the application to two audiences, the US audience and the audience of your host country. And so if we're thinking about how different two different countries are, that's a pretty significant deal, right? If you're talking about Colombia in South America and all you're talking about is like all of the drug wars and all these things, and I need to go there and help these people and all this, and their host country people are like, okay, that was in the 80s. We've been doing a lot better. Like, can you not do that? You know, they're going to not choose you. So that's something you really want to keep in mind. Any bold claims that you make about a country or kind of exaggerate your knowledge might be able to get past the US side, but it's not going to make it past the host country. So that's very important to keep in mind. They make the final decision. So they make those final decisions. If you make it past the first round, you'll find out about that in mid-January. And then between February and April, you'll probably find out about if you're selected as a finalist / winner. So yeah, any questions about the timeline? No, maybe, okay, great. So who are ETAs? I've got my pictures just sprinkled all up in here. So these are some pictures from when I was an ETA in South Korea, like I said. The first picture over here, I just love it. I love the Black excellence here. So these are all of our ETAs from my cohort. Like I said, we had 3, we could renew for up to 3 years. So we did have a larger group of all the ETAs that are Black, but this is just from my particular year. There are about 75 of us, and this is our group of Black Fulbrighters. So we have 2 who went to Howard, so we've got our HBCU alum in there. We have a girl who's now in medical school. This one right here, she's in med school. Actually, we have 2, med school and med school. One's back in Korea. Actually, 3's in med school, my goodness. So I say this to say, everyone's background was different, right? So like, there's not one form of ETA. Anybody can be an ETA. So Victoria, if you said like, I did this agriculture thing, I don't know if I want to do that anymore. Like, they do not care. That is not the point for them. And there's things that you can learn from that. So like teaching about like sustainable farming, like that's education too. Like there's so many different things that you can pull from to put in your application if that's something that you want to pursue in the future. You just got to make those connections. So all of us are doing different things. A lot have gone on to win other scholarships and fellowships. So the one in the middle who's in medical school, she got like this grant for Black people in medicine. This girl, why is my mouse not working here? She won the Rangel Fellowship, which is for the Foreign Service. So that's something you guys should consider if that's something that's interesting to you. So yeah, I say this to say, there's no one size fits all. Then we have the people over here that I actually ended up being in the same city with. All of us are interested in different things. And like we do have, out of all of these, one person who actually wanted to be a teacher. Just one. We have someone who's interested in speech pathology, someone who is interested in immigration law, lots of different things. So there's no one size for the ETA. So don't be worried about that. If you think the experience would make sense for you, you think would be valuable for you in your career, then I say go for it. So getting to the factors of selection, how do they choose the people for their grants? So the quality and feasibility of the proposal. So feasibility, when you're thinking about like a research project, that makes sense to you. But what happens when you're doing it as an ETA? What does that really mean? So they're asking you, do you have transferable skills? That's really what that means here. So in your statement of grant purpose, you need to show that you have transferable skills and you need to tell them exactly what you're planning to do in the classroom. Just like you would do a research project proposal and say, these are my methodologies, this is my timeline, that kind of thing. Same thing happens for the statement of grant purpose. You're going to tell them exactly what you're planning to do in the classroom as an English teaching assistant. For your academic and professional record, of course, you're going to have to upload a transcript from if you studied abroad long-term, you need to get those as well. And they will ask you for, you know, different honors, awards, activities, jobs, those types of things. Personal qualifications. So I'm going to get into this a little bit more later, but they want to be able to see you as a person. It is really hard for people to say no when they feel like they know you. And that's an art to be able to write that well, to get them to really see you on paper. It's hard to do, but once you do it, it's very difficult. There is no one perfect applicant that ticks all the boxes perfectly. So if you can get them to see, like, even though I haven't had that formal teaching experience or that kind of thing, I've still got these other qualities. So make sure you get those things down. Language preparation, that's something I'll talk about as well. Some countries will have language requirements and some countries will have interviews before they make their final selection in that language. So that's something you need to keep in mind when you're deciding where you want to apply. Preference factors established by the Fulbright Foreign Scholarship Board. Those may change from year to year, but a lot of that really is like the Fulbright fit. They're looking for that leadership. They're looking for that go-get mentality, that outgoingness, that ambassadorial piece. That's something you need to weave throughout your application. Next, the extent to which the candidate and the project will help advance the Fulbright program goals. That's still with the mutual understanding, exchange, those kind of things. Requirements of the program in individual countries. So read the program page carefully. If they say, we want people who have teaching skills, a teaching background. So Columbia ETA is an example of that. If you have no teaching skills, no background, you probably shouldn't be applying for that country. It shows a lack of research on your part. So please read careful what they're asking for. They're saying, we would love to have someone who has a STEM background. That's important. If they're saying, we want someone who's going to be able to live in harsh conditions, and you don't address that at all in your application, they're going to think you didn't read the stuff that they told you to read. So keep that in mind when you're working on your application components. And then desirability of achieving diversity. So if that's something that's important to you, You know, you yourself being African American, Black, that's important, but also talk about like what that means to you and why that's important to the Fulbright program, right? So me being a Black teacher in Korea and who can speak Korean, that was important for my students to see. That was important for my host family to see, and talk about why that's important to the goals of the Fulbright program. Any questions? Yes, no, maybe? So this slide is very hard to see because I just jacked it from the Fulbright website and it's not actually a slide, but bear with me. So this is kind of how the National Screening Committee evaluates your application. And so I can send these slides to Stephanie afterwards and she can get them out to you, but this is something you should have like posted right next to you while you're writing the drafts. Make sure you're checking these boxes, right? You need to have strong written English skills because you're going to go teach English. You'd be amazed by the number of native English speakers who do not have strong skills in their writing and they're applying for an English teaching assistantship. It's concerning. So make sure that your writing is strong. It doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, everyone has problems, but make sure you have someone reading them, right? I'll offer myself up. Stephanie is happy to help as well. But yes, make sure it reads well. Make sure, again, look at the country requirement. If they're asking for a supplementary project, so a side project, make sure you have it well thought out and included in your application. Again, they're looking at your extracurriculars, your academic background, training. So you need to tell them, oh, I've actually taken some TESOL classes before, so I know how to teach. Or I am a tutor, English tutor on campus for our international students. That's important, right? Then again, the Fulbright fit. So they're looking for adaptability, flexibility, leadership, your future plans. It needs to make sense. Why is Fulbright the logical next step for you? You need to make that case for you. Your community engagement. Again, I'll get into all of these components in detail as they appear in the application. But these are all things you need to keep in mind as you're working on the application. One thing that I always tell students is details will get you very far in this competition, and showing instead of telling will get you very far as well. And I'll get into what that means in a bit. So before you get into any of that, before you just start writing stuff, you need to choose where you are going. That is the most important thing because you're going to be most competitive for the place that makes the most sense to you. And so I just threw up some random different pictures to kind of explain how I landed on Korea. So I didn't really tell you guys my background. So in undergrad, I studied communications and East Asian studies. I studied abroad in South Korea for a full year doing intensive language study. And then I came back and I started studying Mandarin Chinese. And so I had also studied in Taiwan for a little bit. And so I was trying to decide between Taiwan and Korea. And then I had a question about, do I want to apply for a study grant or research, whatever. But for the ETA specifically, I was stuck between Korea and Taiwan. And I wasn't sure which one I wanted to choose. And so pretty much what it came down to, and this is going to sound ridiculous, there's a couple things. I liked the culture of both places. I felt comfortable in both places. So that's why we've got this little nice picture of a temple. I liked Korean food better than Taiwanese food. That sounds crazy, right? But you're going to be there for a year, right? You want to be your best self. If you're not eating well and you're not happy with that, that's a problem. Think about that, right? When you studied abroad, you may have gone on like a Maymester, a short summer program, and you're like, oh, I can eat, you know, Costa Rican food for a month, but can you do it for a year, right? That's something you need to keep in mind. I love Korean food. I'd done it for a year before. I was like, I can eat Korean food for a year and be happy. I'm okay with that. Another thing, the weather. Taiwanese weather is terrible, and I did not want to deal with that for a year. So I took that into consideration. It sounds absurd. This picture here, Korean language skills. I studied Korean for a year, so I wasn't worried about Korean. I studied Mandarin, but my Korean was much better. So I thought, you know what? I'm gonna go with Korea because I can already speak Korean. I'm going to have a better time. I can make a better relationship with the co-teachers that I have. That's something to keep in mind. The next thing you need to consider are the students that you will be teaching. So what is the education system like? Am I okay with that? Because in Korea, my students were in class from 7 a.m. to midnight. And then they would go and stay at, if they live, yeah, I know, Stephanie, but that's a thing, yeah. So yes, my students, these are the top students, 7 a.m. to midnight. And they were the top students, so they lived in the dorm on campus, so they'd actually stay up to like 2 a.m. studying, and they do it all again. That's Korean teaching culture, you know? They're tired in class all day, so they're gonna be sleeping a lot of the time in class. That's part of the high school culture in Korea. These are things that you need to know, right? And why is that important beyond just knowing what your experience is gonna be like? You need that to be reflecting in your application. You need to show that you know what you're getting yourself into, right? That you've done the research. So like, I know Korean education system is like X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to do X, Y, like, you know, ABC. And they're going to say, okay, she understands it. But if you start saying all these things about all these things you're going to do that are just so not realistic and shows that you don't know anything about the host country, they're going to question that. They're going to say, you know what, I think this person's a little naive, and they'll pass on you. So really do research about the host country's education system. Keep in mind what age group you're going to teach. So in some countries, they'll say you're teaching university students. Others will say you're teaching elementary students. You know, maybe they'll give you a choice. That's something you also need to keep in mind. Put that in your application. If they give you a choice, say, I'd prefer to teach elementary students because X, Y, and Z, but I'm open to whatever. Okay, that's a good way to start. But you need to have that in there. You need to have a reasoning in there. The final thing, this is my host family who I'm obsessed with. I love them. I adore them. We're still very close. The South Korea ETA program requires you to live with a Korean family. Some people love that. Some people hate that. I loved it personally, but my host family didn't speak English at all. So for people who didn't speak Korean, they may have had a very hard time adjusting to that part of the program. Some of my friends got lucky and their host family could speak English, but mine did not. I was in a very, you know, not rural, it was suburban, but it was like being in the South. And so not everybody was open to having like international experience or having people from other countries in their home. Like my host dad was a fisherman, like country dude. So that's something to keep in mind as well. What are the living conditions that you're going to be in while you're abroad? Who are you going to be interacting with on a day-to-day basis? If you want super independence, that's probably not the best fit for you. Because, you know, as a someone in their mid to late 20s, they're probably not going to want a Korean mother telling them what to do or doing their laundry for them and those kinds of things. I loved it. I was like, yes, do whatever. But that's something to keep in mind. Any questions about location? All right. So I know you guys went over these things, the application components. So I'm going to get a little bit more in depth about what the ETA program is looking for, what things you need to highlight. I'm going to be switching between the PowerPoint and some documents that I use with my students at University of South Carolina. We do a lot of different writing workshops over the summer. So at any point, if you have a question, please let me know. For the application, abstract, host country engagement, and future plans, those are the most overlooked part of the application, but they are essential. These are the first things that they are saying in your application. And so I'm going to go through those and kind of give you tips on how to perfect those and make those as strong as you can. Next is a statement of grant purpose. Again, this is your project proposal. I do not want to see everything about your past here. I want to see what you're doing in that country. So if I pick you up and I drop you in Spain and you're an English teaching assistant, what are you doing? That's what needs to be in that essay. Not, I love Spain and I studied abroad there and it was a great time and I love the culture and I can't wait for blah, blah, blah. No, as an English teaching assistant in Spain, this is what I'm going to do. I know this is what the education system's like. I want to teach in this region. I chose this region because I will draw on my past experience as a blah, 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 and do blah, blah, blah in the classroom. That's what this essay needs to look like. Your personal statement is going to focus more on your past, right? So who are you? Where you come from? What drives you? What are your passions? Get in those pieces about adaptability, resilience, open-mindedness, how you interact with others, where you're headed, what's your path, and why you're interested in that country. That needs to be sprinkled in there somewhere, kind of throughout. And then why Fulbright is a logical next step. So tell me, I'm planning to be a director of international exchanges at a research university and encourage more STEM students to study abroad. That's my goal. And so I want to go and teach in Kyrgyzstan because I know that they have like a STEM initiative, and this international exchange is going to be good for understanding kind of the US goals for international education. Okay, that's an example. So these are the kind of things that need to be included. Your entire application should read well together. They're not separate. Read them all together when you're working on it. And make sure there's a common thread or a theme throughout the entire thing. They should be reflected in your letters of recommendation. For the English teaching assistantship, they are not traditional letters of recommendation, they are forms. So they are asked a couple of questions. Your letter writers are asked a couple of questions about your adaptability, flexibility, your English skills, your academic abilities or whatever, those kinds of things. And they just respond to those questions. So that it's not a traditional letter. That's something to keep in mind. You guys probably won't have the campus committee evaluation, maybe for next year. And then if your country requires a foreign language evaluation, then that's something you need as well. Any questions about these things? No, awesome, okay, oops. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and then reshare so we can kind of get into specific details of the different types of things. So I'm gonna start with the short answer responses. Because like I said, they are very important and often overlooked. We just did, like right before I hopped on this writing workshop for short answer responses, because after we had our committee evaluation, we realized that students were just throwing these together last minute. And that's not okay. And they were just copying and pasting like maybe the first paragraph of one essay and just throwing that in there. And I'm like, you cannot do that. They are going to be annoyed. So these are, again, I'll send this stuff to Stephanie. She'll probably use it in the future when you guys are planning to apply. But these are some things that are pretty important. Let me pull up the short answer responses stuff. Actually, let's also take a look at the Fulbright page really quick before I get into this. Because again, choosing your country is so important. So how many of you guys have been to this website? Like, great. This is important. When you're going through, you want to look at the country description, like I said. So let's look at East Asia, because that's my place. Let's look at Taiwan. And look at all these different grants that they have. They've got a ton because Taiwan's like, we want people to come here. And so they've dedicated lots of their taxpayers' dollars for this Fulbright program. And so here at the bottom, they have 145 ETA positions. That's a lot. So they're going to tell you the candidate profile. What are we looking for? All majors. They don't care. Great. They also say certified teachers are very welcome. So that kind of makes you think, okay, they really do like people who have a teaching background. Why is that? That might tell you something about the education system there. They're telling you the accepted degree levels. This is typically like obtained, but if you have any questions about like, can I apply for this as someone who's getting their PhD, that's something that you need to probably email the person who's here at the bottom. They'll probably have contact information, so you can go to their site and ask. They'll tell you about the housing, right? Independent study, they're like, oh, no research is required. Great, do whatever you want. Then they're going to tell you the details about the teaching experience in Taiwan. This is important. Like, you need to read this and have it next to you while you're writing. So you make sure you're ticking the boxes, writing what they're asking for. They'll tell you about like health issues, like certain places. They'll tell you where you'll be placed. So, okay, elementary, middle, secondary, that's important. Different cities that you'll be in, great. All good things to know. Let's take a look at another country. Let's do Brazil. They have 40, okay? They're taking, okay, also please, please pay attention to the date of the grant. If you are graduating in December, if you're a December grad for whatever reason, make sure you know that you will have been graduated by the time this program starts. That is important. We have had students before go through and completely mess up on the eligibility. Not only that, also if you hold dual citizenship for some reason, double check and make sure you are eligible. That's not really something that us as advisors can do. So Stephanie doesn't know everything about all of y'all. So please make sure you check the eligibility. This one's very different. This one, so they are looking for people who have like real legit teaching experience. So degree in TESOL, ESL, English linguistic are highly preferred. Highly. That means that's what they want. If they get in those and their quality, that's who they're choosing over someone who doesn't have that background. So keep that in mind. Language proficiency, required, intermediate. So not maybe, not suggested, it says it's required. You need that. It is, again, in bold. So don't try to work around that. Really make sure you're reading it. Then they're saying university post-secondary institution. So that's why they want people who have legit teaching backgrounds, because you're going to be teaching adults. Again, they're going to tell you how many hours you have. They're going to say, oh, okay, we want you to do a supplementary project because you only going to be here for, 30 hours a week. This is stuff that you need to keep in mind. Finally, the Fulbright page does have statistics here. So if you, all things considered, can decide between Taiwan and Korea, go and look at the statistics. So they will tell you for each country how many recipients and applicants they had. So for like the past 4 years or so, 3, yeah. So that's something to keep in mind. They'll tell you how many people were awarded. So you can make that decision based off of that, perhaps. All right, going back to our hints and tips. So I'm going to show this FAQ first because I think this is probably the best place for you all to start. FAQ. Okay. So these are the main things. So the first question is, who should I have write my letters of recommendation? I don't know who to ask. Ask people who know you the best. I say have at least one academic reference. Doesn't necessarily have to be in your field, but if you can get someone where you've written papers for so they can talk about your ability to write and articulate your thoughts in English versus a math teacher, that's important. Yeah, again, I'll send you all of this. You're fine. So things to avoid: savior complex. We often refer to this as white savior complex, but savior complex. This is something that Black people can do too, Being in America, growing up here, we might think, oh, well, we know better than these other places. For some reason, that's just a very American thing. So make sure the way you approach your application is not like, I'm going to help. It's I'm going to learn and I'm going to contribute, right? It needs to be an exchange. It is a two-way street. avoid generalizations about the host country, the culture, and the people, right? Just like you don't want people to make generalizations about you, you don't want them to make, you don't want to make generalizations about them. So that some people might think like, well, all Americans have guns, or, you know, all these people are like that. You know, you want to avoid those types of things. Try to think of it from your point of view. Would you like it if someone were saying that statement about all Black people, all Americans, right? The next thing is you want to avoid retelling your entire life story. So in that personal statement, we do not want to have, you know, I was born in blah, 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 blah. And when I was 5 years old, blah, blah, blah. If it's not relevant, if it's very relevant. So if something that happened at 5 years old, so let's say your sibling got diagnosed with a certain like terminal illness, and that inspired you, seeing them grow up with that terminal illness inspired you to become a doctor. That makes sense. But if it has nothing to do with anything and you just want to tell them everything that's ever happened to you, leave it out. We do not need that. If you happen to be pre-med, and this is for a lot of pre-professional degrees, and not even necessarily the pre-professional degrees, but throw your reasoning of going abroad as like, I need cultural experience, throw that out. That is not original, it's not unique. Whatever you put in your essays, it needs to be something that only you could have said, right? Only you could have said it, and it could only really be said about the place that you're going, right? So with Taiwan and Korea, there's a lot of similarities in East Asia. What are some things that I should avoid saying, just like, you know, they study really hard? Okay, yes, that's the culture in East Asia. What about Korea specifically? What is it like in Korea versus the other places? Why have I chosen that specific place? So I get this a lot with people who want to go to Spanish-speaking countries. I want to go here because I want to improve my Spanish skills. Okay, do you know how many places you can do that? A ton. So avoid that. Tell us why you want to go to that specific place. What about their culture, their history, their people, their land that has interest you? Like, that needs to get weaved in throughout, because that's also your way to kind of flex your knowledge a little bit. Again, make your essays personal. You want them to get a sense of who you are, instead of saying like, you know, I'm adaptable, or I've been through a lot of hard things in my life. Can you give us an example? That's what I mean when I say show, don't tell. So don't say I'm open-minded. Tell us, when I went to Costa Rica for a spring break trip, I had this encounter, and I first didn't agree with this person, but, you know, we learned to communicate with each other. And by the end of this trip, I realized, like, man, you know, people have different experiences, and that's why they think the way they think. It doesn't always have to be in a broad example. I know a lot of times people want to focus on their experiences abroad, but that doesn't have to necessarily be the case. As all students who have gone to an HBCU, maybe you can talk about like your first time, like having a more like, I guess like a PWI experience, right? Because maybe you went and like had this internship somewhere and you were the only person of color, right? That's an isolating circumstance. That might have been something you needed to adjust to culturally, right? From coming from an HBCU. Talk about that. Talk about how you work through that. And talk about what you contributed, like your perspective as a Black professional, right? Because that's something you're also going to be able to contribute to the Fulbright experience, you know, as, you know, the Black experience. You're going to bring that, you can bring that to your classroom. Those are things that you want to talk about. You also want to weave that into the short answer for community engagement. You want to talk about opportunities for you to exchange your culture with others. It does not need to be a great big idea. It could be very simple. So let's say you are part of the debate team at Prairie View, you do debate, and you are really interested in that, and there's an opportunity within your country to do like a debate kind of thing with your students. pull that in. That's something. I did that. Like I led my students to an English debate competition, and it was one of the most fun experience. One of the pictures I showed you before with the group of us, it was from that debate experience. So like if you have something like that, just say that like this is a perfect opportunity to be able to learn about like their culture, because they're going to debate about issues in their society. I'll be learning, but I can also lend my skills as like doing debate in the US and kind of help them sharpen their English and that kind of thing. Whatever it is, just make sure it's feasible and make sure it makes sense. Any questions about that? Yeah, I think these are all the same. When you're writing your first draft, don't worry about the length. Just get all your ideas out and then start, reeling back from there. I think I have one more of these to show you. I think I have two more, but this one's really short. Okay, so the next one is, oh, that's not coming up. That's weird. Statement of grant purpose. I don't know why this isn't. Show all windows. Okay, there we go. All right, so back to the statement of grant purpose. I know we're running out of time in a little bit, but just
take your time, Paige. I want to make sure that we get all the information.
Yeah, if you have to go early, I'll be sending all of this along to Stephanie, so y'all don't have to worry too much. So the statement of grant purpose. So this again is the second main essay. So the first one is the personal statement. Like I said, you need to tell us about where you're headed, why this makes sense, kind of set yourself up for a Fulbright, right? Like this is my path and the Fulbright is the logical next thing for me to do on the road to this goal. The statement of grant purpose is really where they're getting your proposal of what you're planning to do in country. So again, focus your essay on your time abroad. What are you proposing to do and how will you do it? This also needs to be reflected in your abstract. So the abstract is the very first thing that they see. That is your first place where you're showing them what kind of writer you are, why you're doing this. It's pretty much the elevator pitch version of your application. And so you need to give me the who, what, where, when, why, all of that in the abstract. I'll get into that in a second. But for the statement of grant purpose, you need to tell me exactly what you want to do and how you're going to do it. Do not restate a bunch of things from your personal statement or short answers. It should be connected, but it shouldn't be repetitive. I don't want to see the same two sentences anywhere in this application, because that means you already said it. You don't need to say it again, or you can say it in a different way. Again, research the place you're going and find out ways to show that you have done that. So like I said, know the place that you're going. So why would Brazil want 40 ETAs? Why would Colombia want 100 something ETAs? Why are they giving their taxpayers dollars for this? It's not for nothing. It's government money, right? So why are they doing that? You have to think about it. And for somewhere like Colombia, they're actually funding the full ETA program. Some countries it's both, but Colombia is like, no, we're going to do it. We're going to drive this ourselves. So you need to know why they're asking for this. You need to be as specific as possible about how you're going to achieve your goals, right? So I'm going to get my students to start speaking in English because that's what I'm supposed to do as an ETA. Okay, how? What if your students all speak different levels of English, right? What if you have some students who are shy, who are not interested at all? What do you do when all your students are good at reading and writing, but they cannot produce any oral language? That's something you need to consider, right? And so while you don't have to give a full teaching plan, you need to go into pedagogy a little bit. So I plan to incorporate music, I know for a fact that Korean students love Justin Bieber, and I'm going to make them sing Baby a bajillion times just so they can start saying English words. Even if they're not remembering it, we're going to have them sing it, and then we're going to go in and look at the different, grammar points that we're learning that day, right? You need to incorporate that stuff. I'm going to use games. Okay, how? I'm going to use skits, right? I really love literature. And so I want to incorporate literature into my classroom, right? And then how do you assess the level of your students' English? These are things that you need to think about. So researching those different things, it's important, and it needs to be incorporated in that statement of grant purpose. If there's something specifically about the Black experience, so part of being an ETA, again, is that cultural ambassador piece. What about the US are you going to teach them? What are you going to, put in the application? So some students abroad might think that everybody's from New York or California, and you're not from either of those. So like, I want them to know about other places in the US. I want them to know about the South. So I'm going to introduce Southern culture to them. How are you going to do that, right? These are all different things that need to be incorporated in there. And avoid any personal anecdotes. That does not need to be in the statement of grant purpose at all. That's your personal statement. This one's more of a like professional pitch kind of thing. I think I pretty much cover those. So again, look at the country's description page, see what they're asking for, and make sure you are telling them exactly what you bring to the opportunity. Last one I'm going to share is the short answer response. Is there any questions at this point? No? Okay. Where is that last one? Oh, it's a PDF. That's what I kind of like, where is that? Okay. So this is something that you guys could potentially do in the future when you guys are actually working on the application. It's a peer review that I'm having my students do. Can you guys see this all right?
Yes, yes.
So what we are having our students do is reading each other's short answer responses and see if they have answered these questions. So if you have not answered these questions in your short answer responses, that means they did not get the job done. And so the first one is, why have they chosen this country? You'd be surprised. People aren't saying why they chose that country at all. They'll just say like, I think Chile is really cool. Why? Because they speak Spanish. Okay, so does Costa Rica. Like, what is it about Chile, So that needs to get into your essay. Why are you pursuing this specific grant type? So like, I really want to go to Chile because I love this part about their culture. I love the food. I studied abroad there, blah, blah. So I get the why you want to go there. Okay, so why aren't you applying for a study grant? Why are you applying for an ETA? That needs to be clear. I need to know why you chose an ETA over a different type of grant. And then why Fulbright, right? So, okay, I know Spain has this pretty robust like English teaching program. Why are you applying for a Fulbright? What is it about Fulbright that's unique or different? Because, Fulbright's intentional. They're, really driving in the cultural exchange. You have a group of people to support you in your cohort. Lots of different reasons why you would want to pursue Fulbright versus another type of grant. So really make sure you hit that in as well. How would this Fulbright contribute to your personal, professional, and academic goals? That needs to be there somewhere. What are you going to do to engage with the host community? In what ways does this activity allow you to interact with the host community? So sometimes people will say, I'm going to join this international club and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, yeah, but how are you going to meet, Peruvian people? Like, how are you going to meet people from the actual country? Not in the international club, probably not. So how are you going to engage with people who are actually from that country? Why have you chosen this activity to participate in? I'm going to take cooking classes. Why? Oh, because I actually really love cooking. It's one of my favorite pastimes. Okay, that makes sense. But you need to tell me why you chose that. How is this activity unique to your host country? So like, if I'm taking cooking classes, I want to take, you know, traditional Korean cooking classes because I really can't do that anywhere else. I can't do that in the US. That's something that you need to incorporate. Finally, what is your plan upon return to the US? So when I come back, I plan on finishing up my dissertation and defending, and then I will pursue a career in blah, blah, blah. Or, you know, I plan to come back and pursue a master's degree in international education at blah, blah, blah university, and hopefully will acquire employment at this type of organization. And, you know, the last line is, you know, the Fulbright experience will assist me towards these goals in blah, blah, blah ways. Okay, cool. I think that's pretty much it. So again, I'll send all these to Stephanie because I think it is kind of a lot to digest. I completely understand that. But I just want you guys to get an idea of how much detail is required to really sell yourself in these applications. It's not that the students that are winning are like the best people ever. It's just that they explained themselves well. They sold themselves. And that's what you guys need to do. They really do want they want more diversity. They really do want students coming from HBCUs because it's such a different, unique experience, especially now, like HBCUs are getting so much attention in the news now. So, I mean, take advantage of that. They're looking for you. All you have to do is apply and give it your best effort. If you go through these things and you check and highlight where you're hitting these points, I guarantee you'll have a good shot at this. And yeah, you can ask me for questions. I'll add my email to the chat or my personal one because yeah, that might get to me faster. But yeah, please feel free to reach out to me with any questions you have. Again, I will send this all to Stephanie. And yeah, are there any questions? I've been blabbering a lot.
Email it to me, Paige, all of it.
I will.
I do have a question. So what's the difference between the application packages for the ETA and for the research? Because I'm kind of leaning more towards the research because when I would go and do the Fulbright, I would be working on my dissertation at that time. So I feel like it probably makes more sense for me to do the research.
Yeah. And that's pretty common for people who are getting like advanced degrees. Mm-hmm. So the main difference, there's the recommendation letters are traditional. They're not the form. So that's just something for your recommenders to know, not a big deal. The application component, so like the short answers are all the same. You still have 2 essays. The only difference is you have 2 pages instead of 1. So for the ETA, the personal statement's 1 page and the statement of grant purpose is 1 page. For the study or research grants, you get 2 pages for the statement of grant purpose because you're doing a project proposal. So it's going to be a lot longer. So that's the main difference with the application. You also have to get a letter of affiliation. And what I'm sending Stephanie, it isn't just ETA information. So you'll have the points that you need to drive in for the research grants because they do require another level of, very specific details. And so for the research grant, the letter of affiliation is just a letter of support from either a professor or some research organization abroad that's going to host you. And so you don't have to necessarily work with them. Sometimes it's more of a visa issue than you actually needing to collaborate with them. But this is someone that you'll meet with for the 9 to 12 months that you're abroad. Maybe you'll meet them monthly to kind of just check in. Maybe they'll give you access to certain archives or certain labs or whatever. Sometimes people join a project that's already happened. Other times when people are doing dissertation research, they're like, nope, I just want to go abroad. And, are you willing to give me like a workspace? Can I get access to these things? Can I come into these different events that you guys have on campus kind of thing? And so if you have questions about that, let me know. I can give you some hints and tips about like how to obtain a letter of affiliation because that's usually the scariest part for the research grants.
Okay, because I know like thinking about Columbia and Purdue has a strong relationship with Columbia. They actually have people from Columbia, from Purdue that work in Columbia. So I don't know if that would be.
That's always a great thing to drive in. If there's already a relationship there, build on that. And if there are people, that's another great tip. If there are people from your host country on your campus and they're already affiliated with the institution, go talk to them, because they'll be like, oh yeah, I'd love for you to come. Like, let's hook this up, right? Definitely do that.
Thank you.
Something I would like to add, because I know, Victoria, your research interest is very similar to mine. You're interested in studying abroad and its impact on Black students. So maybe working with your study abroad office, see where their highest destinations, which study abroad providers where most of their Black students attend, and that could possibly be your potential host organization. You could work with them on like pre-departure orientation creation, supplemental materials and additional resources to help that transition for the student population, and like help integrating their curriculum and making sure it's more diverse. So
that's a great idea. Thank you, Steph.
Yeah, especially like for Columbia as well. I mean, my students, I have a couple of Black students who are interested in Columbia because of its like Afro-Latino population. There's like different organizations within Columbia that you can work with, that they have like kind of heritage travel kind of stuff. So where they bring like Black Americans to Columbia and they learn about like the Black experience in Columbia. Like, that's really cool. Like, how can you incorporate that into programs?
I just thought about it. My co-advisor, she actually takes Black students to Columbia on spring break every year. Yeah, I just thought about that.
Yeah, definitely look into that because they appreciate that. The more your project contributes to the goal of Fulbright, which we looked at diversity, mutual understanding, the better.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Well, thank you all for hosting me. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Paige. I think we're going to wrap this up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop recording.